Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and as of the expansion of War Within, playing alts has been one of my favorite pastimes. There's just so many different playstyle options between the different classes and the hero specs added with this expansion, with many potential picks offering so much flavor and even change to gameplay, though not all of these have seen significant enough numbers to actually be played within dungeons and raids. But thanks to regular class tuning and adjustments, we've actually seen a rise of certain few builds that allow classes to really go beyond what they've been able to, and so many different playstyles have been able to really solidify themselves as either outliers within the highest damage, or a potential new playstyle, or a new rising champion within the meta. And those are the playstyles I ideally wanted to highlight in today's video to give you some of the different hero specs that you should definitely pick up if you're looking to play more alts in the War Within, with all these newer playstyles offering either superior damage increases or just simply a better playstyle, or something that has solidified itself over the last few weeks compared to the launch of the game going all the way to now, that has become a staple that everybody's looking for their end game group content when you're pushing season 1 of War Within. As always, if you guys want to see more videos like these for the War Within expansion, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But for now, let's dive right into the hero specs that you definitely should check out if you're playing any of these classes. Starting out with the Enhanced Shaman, which is what I think actually might be one of the best classes right now in War Within Season 1, specifically for Mythic Plus, specifically for raiding, anything that has to do PvE content, literally the strongest class right now. And this would actually see a little bit of change when it comes to hero specs. Now, they recently did, in a series of patch notes, end up nerfing Stormbringer down a little bit, not enough for it to become all of a sudden no longer played in Mythic Plus, but just a hair less good. But this also has allowed someone like Totemic to slowly rise to prominence, at least when it comes to just the raw damage that it brings in for raiding content. This one got buffed up by a lot during the development of 11.05 update, but nobody's really given Totemic a solid shot, not until recently. And while the static totem of Surging Totem is still kind of annoying to play with, and I really think it should maybe be a baseline feature, you will still have to move this totem around if you actually want it to be a little bit more mobile, so enemies that are constantly moving around are not going to be ideal for the totem. But the damage this thing does on its own is actually so incredibly good right now. It is an incredibly powerful playstyle within raid fights where single target damage is out, and it looks like it's been seen a little bit more play within Mythic Plus as well. Not enough to make it better than Stormbringer, but it's at least getting a lot more recognition. Ever since they buffed up a lot of its different talents, like change up to lively totems, where they took the original reactivity as part of it, changed up reactivity to work with hot hand. They really massively overbuffed Totemic Rebound, so you could really fully juice up that totem and the damage that it does, plus the capstone with whirling elements and how it much better plays with the rest of your Enhancement Shaman toolkit makes Totemic a much more viable and a feasible option with a ton of damage behind it if you could play it correctly. That totem, if you could place it in the right spot and really supercharge it to an nth degree, that totem could do a ton of damage all on its own, which, I mean, Enhancement to some degree has always felt kind of like a pet class with the ghost tools that you can summon, whether you summon them actively or passively. But the totem itself, at least in details, also counts as a pet as well. So if you're able to supercharge the totem, it can actually just keep pulsating for a bunch of damage, doing more damage than you do in some cases, which is the wildest playstyle ever. And because of this raw, overwhelming amount of damage, I think is why you should definitely give Enhancement Shaman as a Totemic a go yet again, especially if you're a big fan of doing competitive damage than anybody else in your raid or party. Now, another hero spec that's seen a bit of a surprising uptick is that for a Blood Death Knight, and I really do wish Blood Death Knights were a little bit more popular than they are right now compared to like prop warriors or even prop paladins. I really wish they were a bit more of a meta pick because they're so incredibly fun and have always been my favorite tank of all tank classes for like multiple expansions now. But Blood Death Knights recently have changed up from what normally would be a Deathbringer to a Sin Land, and this was kind of like a sneaky little switch up that happened over the last couple of weeks, primarily because Sin Land does really good damage. Defensively, they keep nerfing Deathbringer again and again and again, so at some point Deathbringer and Sin Land become a little more even, but the damage that Sin Land can bring within raid content, even dungeon content, really just sets it apart right now, and it become a lot better after a bit of a rework with it. What's incredible too about this Sunlayan playstyle in particular, it actually allows Death Knights to even play different runes on their weapons. Normally most Death Knights go Rune of the Fallen Crusader on your primary weapon. You set it and you forget it, it grants you random procs of healing, but also increases your strength by a considerable amount for 15 seconds. It is the go-to rune for all forms of content. But Blood Death Knight, specifically with Sunlayan, can start to play the Rune of Sanguination, which buffs the damage of your Death Strike, increasing it based on target's missing health, and the way that Sunlayan interacts with Death Strike, allowing you to get even more vampiric strikes in order to be able to fuel your damage further and increasing the damage of those Death Strikes. Rune of Sanguination synergizes with it incredibly well, where Death Strike allows you to achieve actually really high damage within raiding content for single target. You're not going to be doing as much damage as another DPS class, but amongst tanks you're doing some considerably more damage. Though even at Mythic Plus, this playstyle actually excels and has been excelling quite a bit. Like I said, Blood Death Knight is not the most popular pick, but it's gotten much better, especially ever since they changed up the way the Gift of Sunlayan works to benefit not from your vampiric aura, but rather from your dancing rune weapon. Your offensive button activates your offensive capabilities. Who would have thought that having an offensive button do better than a defensive button? I mean, this is the best option ever, best change ever. And with the playstyle that Sunlayan has right now, if you have enough haste, maintaining the primary buff from that vampiric strike, the essence of the Blood Queen buff, is actually quite easy and allows you to go through your resources very rapidly. And the whole gameplay becomes all about maintaining that essence of the Blood Queen stacks, which has become a lot easier for this playstyle in particular. And the overall damage that Sunlayan provides between you doing vampiric strike damage to cleave nearby targets, your Death Strike damage, but also the blood piece that you get to summon and then get to empower them further with someone like Pact of the Sunlayan. All of those things allow you to achieve some incredibly good damage from a tank spec. Nothing necessarily right now is beating Prop Paladin, but the best all other tanks can really do is come as close together or as close to Prop Paladin as they can in terms of performance, and Blood Death Knight definitely does try to inch the way towards what Prop Paladins can do little by little with Sunlayan. Another hero spec that's finally back is the Frostfire Fire Mage, which I am super excited about, because this has been one of the most fun hero specs that I've played back during the alpha and the beta of this expansion, but it was a very different version to what we play today. Normally you would have Frostfire Mages attach themselves to a Lit Fuse and Living Bomb type of a playstyle, which had a lot of synergy with Frostfire, but then they started stripping some of the synergies, nerfing Lit Fuse, nerfing Frostfire, and then it became unplayable. It literally went from the most played thing in the beta to the least played thing in the beta ever. But they've recently given it a little bit more love. It is not quite the same Frostfire Fire Mage as it were. Instead, it actually forgets the whole Living Bomb playstyle completely and instead focuses on some of the other talents in order to better synergize with the Frostfire gameplay, really focusing around the ability of Meteor more than anything. They buffed up everything regarding this ability, from the actual damage of Frostfire Bolts, but also the procs of Frostfire Bolt with Frostfire Infusion, excess fire damage, and also excess frost as well, which synergizes super well with the ability of Meteor that also drops down common storms on top of your target, to the point where Fire Mages to some degree at this point have a lot more frost damage as part of the overall damage kit, like throughout an entire dungeon run or even a raid run. Like the Common Storm is a huge portion of your overall damage, which is a little surreal, but it finally combines a little bit of frost and a little bit of fire in one simple bit of gameplay. And the CDR on this ability, the cooldown reduction behind excess frost, is incredibly fun to play around with, especially as more of your abilities deal frostfire damage, which allows you to gain frostfire mastery much quicker than you usually would, which allows you to really cycle in throughout the frostfire mastery to gain the procs of excess fire and excess frost a lot more regularly. And it's also incredibly instant casting. Like once you get your whole setup rolling in terms of all your damage and abilities, very little downtime, and I think that's my favorite part about this playstyle in particular. So if you enjoy proc-based classes, this may be the playstyle for you overall. So if the last time you played Fire Mage was maybe when you checked out Sun Fury, which was when it was really good. We've seen Fire Mages really falling behind quite a bit as recently, but if you are on a bandwagon to get back on the spec of fire, definitely give Frostfire a go. I think it'll offer a little bit of a fresher experience that's a little bit more engaging, and especially when it comes to the changes on how you use some of your basic combat abilities, since now they get a lot of new fun procs for you to play around with. Next, I want to talk about a playstyle that I think everybody should have as an alt in War Within expansion. There comes a time in every expansion where it's time for you to make an alt character, and everybody usually ends up making the same alt. Something that is strong in all forms of endgame content, something that's super easy to get into, something that is just universally good. And I think Retribution Paladin is that class right now. If you're not playing a Red Pally as an alt, you're probably doing it wrong at this point. What makes Red Pally so good right now is it's just universally good everywhere, whether it is PvP combat, whether it is Mythic Plus content, whether it is raid content. It's just a very decent default, very similar to an augmentation evoker, which could just fit in all group situations, but a little bit more engaging than an augmentation, with a fantastic array of defensives and utility options which have recently been amped up to a new degree, which is really fun to play into if you're a big fan of this whole fantasy of the support classes there to help out their group and party, while also retaining a lot of its power and damage output that a Retribution Paladin has. And what really makes it work right now is Templar. This is the part here, the key that makes it super fun to play into, because playing around the massive hammer that is granted you by the Templar playstyle is just incredibly easy to get into. The actual hammer itself that you get to play as a Templar, the big bonk hammer, is just an insanely fun ability. It deals insane amount of damage every time you use it. It deals fantastic single target, fantastic cleave damage, and with the way that Paladins play right now with the Radiant Glory talent, you don't necessarily have to play around a long window of wings. Essentially, every time you have Wake of Ashes, which is every 30 seconds, you have yourself the biggest damage available, with a lot of random procs of wings in between to keep fueling your overall output. And right now, Paladins are in a position where they offer excellent burst, but also pretty incredible AoE damage within Mythic Plus content specifically, while also very comparable damage within raiding scene as well. It is the most straightforward version of a Paladin that you can play right now, and if you are not playing it at the moment, then you really are missing out, as it's got to be one of the best all classes to bring into this expansion. And the final recommended pick right now I'd have is Subtlety Rogue with the Deathstalker playstyle. Rogue as a class, generally for many players, is one of the harder classes to pick up and learn for many, since it just has so many different little components, from the multiple resources you got to manage between the calm points and the energy, to the different cooldowns and how they all play around one another. But Deathstalker Subtlety, I would say, arguably is one of the easiest versions of Subtlety that you could pick up right now in the War Within Season 1. Especially when it comes to raid content, it is the most straightforward playstyle with a ton of little passive options that offer you random bits of plague damage. But the actual mechanic of applying Deathstalker's mark, spending calm points to consume the mark, and then powering yourself up for a massive explosive eviscerate at the end of it all, it is satisfying, but also the easiest version of Subtlety to get into, with a very simple gameplay loop that also piggybacks off of some of the other things that rogues have gotten recently, like newer players no longer having to manage things like Assassination, so you can just focus on building calm points, spending calm points, maintaining one less little buff for you to manage, and the playstyle has gotten a little bit more straightforward than ever before as of these most recent set of changes. And even in Mythic Plus dungeons, Subtlety Rogues as Deathstalker are finally starting to play the hero spec a little bit, and potentially this one could bring in some of the best AoE damage out there with the right setup. It takes a little bit of time to set up all your bleeds on all of your targets and get all your resources, but once you have all of your cooldowns rolling with the right prep work necessary in order to make it happen, the damage you can do with this build is incredibly fun. And that's what a lot of people usually play rogues for, is for that high visceral damage and burst output at a moment's notice. So if you're looking for a spec of rogue that can just unleash the most amount of burst damage within a raid content, or to burst enemies down in AoE, Deathstalker Subtlety may actually end up being one of those best options out there. And it gives you some bit of variety to play around with rogues outside of just the strict assassination rogues that we usually see within the Mythic Plus environment. With that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and I do hope you guys enjoyed this video update. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community for all the regular War Within updates. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.